In the shadows of 1945 Okinawa, where bombs shattered the silence and orders were never questioned, a comfort station. 5 women imprisoned, bodies used as weapons of war. When a black American soldier discovers their prison, he faces an impossible choice: follow orders or follow his conscience. His white lieutenant warns him to stay away. His country tells him these women are the enemy. But in a world that sees him as less than equal, he recognizes something in their eyes that others miss: humanity worth fighting for. Under cover of night, through artillery fire and prejudice, a rescue begins that will challenge everything these soldiers were taught to believe. When gunfire erupts and blood spills on both sides, who decides which lives are worth saving? And in a war where both sides dehumanize the other, can one act of compassion change what it means to be a hero? The walls shook again. Dust rained down from the ceiling, settling on Hana's black hair like dirty snow. She didn't bother brushing it away. What was more dust when everything else had been taken? 5 women huddled together in the small, damp room of the comfort station. Outside, American bombs fell on southern Okinawa, the noise so constant it had become like breathing. Terrible, but expected. April 1945 was ending in fire and thunder. Hana clutched her torn silk ribbon, once red, now faded to the color of dried blood. It was her last possession from home, from before. "They're coming closer," whispered Yuki, the youngest of them at 16. Her eyes were wide with fear that never seemed to fade. May, the oldest at 24, squeezed Yuki's hand. "The bombing will end. It always does." But this time felt different. For days, the Japanese soldiers who visited their prison had been fewer. The ones who came were nervous, drinking heavily, sometimes forgetting to hurt them in their rush to return to battle positions. The heavy wooden door creaked open. All 5 women immediately straightened, eyes down, faces empty. It was safer that way. Mr. Tanaka, their overseer, stood in the doorway. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Behind him, the sky glowed orange from distant fires. "The Americans have taken the ridge," he announced, his voice tight with anger. "They'll be here by nightfall." Hana felt her heart pound against her ribs. Would American soldiers be worse than Japanese ones? Could anything be worse? Yuki made a small, frightened sound. Mr. Tanaka's gaze cut through them. "I've heard they're sending black soldiers. Animals. They'll tear you apart if they find you." He adjusted his pistol. "Remember your duty to the Emperor. If you cooperate with the Americans, you betray Japan." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Ume, who rarely spoke, whispered, "What are black soldiers?" No one answered. Hana had seen pictures in propaganda papers, drawings of dark-skinned men with exaggerated features, shown as demons or beasts. She didn't believe everything the Japanese officers said anymore, but fear took root anyway. An hour passed. The bombing stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. Then, something new. Voices speaking words Hana didn't understand. English. American voices, getting closer. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. Hana tucked her ribbon into her palm, squeezing it tight. Whatever came next, she would endure. She'd endured everything else. The door handle turned slowly. Light spilled into the room. Hana closed her eyes. Private First Class Isaiah Ward entered the building with his rifle ready, but held low. The war had taught him to be careful, but not trigger-happy. The small concrete building looked abandoned, but you never knew where Japanese soldiers might be hiding. Behind him, Corporal Davis and Privates Miles and Carter spread out, checking corners. The 93rd Infantry Division, the Blue Helmets, had been clearing buildings all day. This one looked like it might have been an administrative office once. Then Isaiah saw the women, 5 of them, huddled against the far wall, thin as rails, bruised, terrified. "Oh Lord," he whispered. Isaiah had heard about places like this, the comfort stations, where Japanese forces kept women as prisoners. The thought made him sick. "Civilians," he called back to the others. "Women." Corporal Davis moved forward, his dark face grim in the fading light. "Check for wounded, then we move on. Captain's orders." Isaiah approached slowly, holstering his sidearm. He didn't want to frighten them more than they already were. He'd seen that look before. In the eyes of beaten dogs. In the eyes of colored folks back home who'd run afoul of the wrong white men. One woman, with a long scar across her cheek, seemed to be shaking harder than the others. Isaiah knelt 6 feet away from her, took out his canteen, and held it out. "Water?" he said softly. When she didn't respond, he pointed to the canteen, then to his mouth, then back to her. Her eyes widened. She glanced at the others, confused. Isaiah placed the canteen on the floor and slid it toward her. "It's okay," he said, though he knew she couldn't understand. "We're not going to hurt you." The woman reached out slowly and took the canteen. Her fingers were raw and cracked. She sniffed the water before taking a small sip, then passed it to the others. Carter was checking a back room. "Empty," he called. Miles stood by the door, keeping watch. "Isaiah, we need to keep moving. Orders." The screeching of the door made them all jump. A Japanese man in a rumpled uniform burst in, shouting in Japanese. Isaiah didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone of command. The women immediately stiffened, eyes down. The man turned to Isaiah and the other soldiers, switching to broken English. "You want women? They serve you. Good service." He gestured at the women like they were merchandise. Isaiah felt his stomach turn. Beside him, Corporal Davis's jaw tightened. "We're not here for that," Davis said coldly. The Japanese man looked confused, then angry. "American soldiers always want women. These are comfort women. For soldiers." Isaiah stood up slowly, towering over the smaller man. "We said no." The room went silent. The women stared, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Isaiah could see the moment when understanding crossed the scarred woman's face. The slightest flicker of something, not hope, not yet, but surprise. Like seeing the sun after months of rain, the evening air outside was thick with humidity and smoke. Isaiah filled his lungs, trying to clear the stench of that room from his nostrils. It smelled like fear and pain and things he didn't want to name. Corporal Davis spat on the ground. Those poor women, God damn this war. They stood in a small circle, the 4 black soldiers, as twilight painted the devastated landscape in blues and grays. A mile away, artillery fire lit up the horizon. Their unit would move again tomorrow, pushing further south. "We need to report that place," Davis said finally. "Get those women proper help." Isaiah nodded. "Command should send medical personnel. Those women need doctors, food." Miles shifted his weight. "You think command's gonna care? They barely give us enough supplies for ourselves." It was true. The 93rd had been treated like second-class soldiers since deployment. Assigned the worst positions, given the oldest equipment. White officers who'd never led colored troops before looked at them with distrust or outright contempt. "We could go back tonight," Isaiah said quietly. "Bring them some of our rations, some bandages." Davis frowned. "Against orders, Ward. We're supposed to report to camp by 1900 hours. So we report in, then some of us go back," Isaiah persisted. "Those women might not make it till tomorrow." Carter, always practical, shook his head. "Japanese stragglers all over these hills. Too dangerous at night." Isaiah glanced back at the dim window of the comfort station. The woman with the scar, there had been something in her eyes. Strength, buried deep beneath layers of fear. He wondered how long she'd been there, what she'd endured. He thought about his mother back in Georgia, his sisters. The world treated women like property everywhere, it seemed, just in different ways. "We can at least tell the medics," Davis conceded. "Maybe they'll send someone." They started walking toward camp, but Isaiah's thoughts stayed behind, in that dark room with its 5 prisoners. Later, as they made their way back to their unit, Isaiah decided he would go back, orders or not. Some things were more important than following rules. Some wounds couldn't wait for official channels. Hannah couldn't sleep. The other women had drifted off, exhausted, but Hannah lay awake, listening to the distant crackle of gunfire and the soft, whimpering breaths of Yuki's nightmares. The American soldiers had been nothing like she expected. The one who offered water, his eyes had been kind, not hungry or hateful, just kind. She couldn't remember the last time a man had looked at her that way. A soft scrape at the window made her freeze. Japanese soldiers returning? Or worse, Mr. Tanaka sometimes came at night, when he'd been drinking. Hana tensed, prepared for the worst. A shadow moved against the moonlight. Too tall for Mr. Tanaka. Too careful. "Hello?" came a whisper. American English. Hana sat up slowly. It was him, the soldier with the kind eyes. He was balanced on a crate outside, peering through the window's broken slats. He held up a small package wrapped in cloth, then pointed to the back door that led to the washing area. Hana hesitated. Was this a trick? But what more could they take from her? She crept past the sleeping women through the narrow hallway to the back door. It was always locked, but the bombings had damaged the frame. If she pushed at the right angle, the door opened with a soft groan. The American soldier stood in the shadows, his dark skin making him nearly invisible in the night. Up close, he was even taller than she remembered. "Food," he whispered, holding out the bundle. "Medicine." Hannah took it carefully. Inside was bread, dried meat, a canteen of fresh water, and bandages. He pointed to a nasty cut on her arm, then to the bandages. "I can help." She didn't understand his words, but his gestures were clear. Still, she hesitated. Men's hands had only brought pain. As if reading her thoughts, he took a small step back, giving her space. Then he pointed to himself. "Isaiah," he said slowly. "Isaiah," Hannah repeated, the foreign name strange on her tongue. He smiled, nodding. Then he pointed to her. "Hannah," she whispered. He repeated it perfectly, then knelt and opened a small tin. Inside was a strong-smelling ointment. He pointed to her cut again, eyebrows raised in question. Slowly, Hannah extended her arm. His touch was gentle, clinical. He cleaned the cut with water from his canteen, applied the ointment, then wrapped it carefully with a clean bandage. All the while, his eyes stayed respectful, never wandering. When he finished, he handed her the remaining supplies, miming that she should share them with the others. A bright light flashed in the distance, a flare illuminating the night sky. Both of them froze. Isaiah pointed to the hills, then to himself, making a walking motion with his fingers. He had to go. "Tomorrow," he whispered, holding up one finger. "I'll come back." Hannah didn't understand the words, but she understood the promise in his eyes. As he slipped away into the darkness, Hannah clutched the supplies to her chest. She didn't trust this kindness, couldn't afford to. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than fear or numbness. She wasn't sure what to call it. Not hope, not yet. The forward camp was stirring when Isaiah returned just before dawn. He washed quickly at the makeshift basin, scrubbing mud from his hands and face. His squad mates were still asleep, except for Miles, who opened one eye as Isaiah settled onto his cot. "Where'd you go?" Miles whispered. "Needed some air," Isaiah replied quietly. Miles didn't press. That was one good thing about serving with other colored soldiers. They understood the need for privacy, for keeping your business your own. White officers were always watching, waiting for them to slip up. The bugle sounded reveille. Men groaned, pulled themselves from sleep, began the morning routine. Isaiah's shoulders ached from the night hike, but he moved quickly, efficiently. Like always, his father had taught him, work twice as hard, be twice as good, and maybe they'll only treat you half as bad. "Assembly in 10 minutes, shouted Sergeant Williams. "Full gear." During roll call, Captain Hayes, their white commanding officer, announced the day's orders. We're pushing south, toward Naha. Intelligence says heavy resistance. The 5th Marines will take point. We'll secure their flanks. Hayes's gaze swept over the black soldiers with poorly disguised contempt. And try not to get separated this time. You colored boys have a habit of wandering off. Isaiah kept his face neutral, though anger burned in his chest. Their unit had held position under heavy fire last week, while white units retreated. They'd lost good men doing it. After dismissal, Lieutenant Brennan, another white officer, cornered Corporal Davis. I heard you found civilians yesterday. Yes, sir. Davis replied. Women in a building east of the ridge. Japanese prisoners, I think. They need medical attention. Brennan frowned. You reported this? To medical, sir. They said they'd send someone when possible. Next time, stick to your orders. Civilians aren't your concern. Davis's jaw tightened. Sir, these women were dismissed, Corporal. Isaiah overheard the exchange as he checked his gear. Nothing surprising. They were expected to fight and die for a country that considered them less than full citizens, for officers who couldn't see past the color of their skin. Back in their tent, Isaiah opened a worn envelope, a letter from his mother that had arrived 2 days ago. The Army censors had cut holes in several places, but he could piece together the news. His youngest sister was doing well in school. His father had found steady work at the shipyard, but there was trouble too. A colored boy from the next county had been beaten for speaking to a white girl. Men in white hoods had burned a cross in front of his family's home. Isaiah folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his breast pocket. Here he was, fighting fascism abroad while it flourished back home. The irony wasn't lost on him, but the letter only strengthened his resolve. He thought of Hannah and the other women, trapped in that comfort station. Different country, different war, but the same story. The powerful using the vulnerable, treating people like things. Tonight he would go back, and he would bring more help. The morning rice was watery, barely enough to fill a cupped hand. Hannah ate slowly, making each grain last. Beside her, Yuki trembled, still weak from the fever that had come and gone for weeks. Hannah had shared the Americans' food with the others during the night, whispering for them to eat quickly and hide any evidence. Now, watching Mr. Tanaka pace nervously by the door, she was glad they'd been careful. Something had changed. The comfort station had usually housed 15 women. Now only 5 remained. The others had been taken away days ago by Japanese soldiers retreating from the American advance. Hannah didn't want to think about what had happened to them. Clean everything, Mr. Tanaka ordered suddenly. Officers may come today, displaced from the northern positions. The women moved mechanically, scrubbing floors, washing the thin sleeping mats. Hannah's bandaged arm ached, but she worked steadily, keeping her face down. As she cleaned near the window, she spotted a scrap of white, a piece of the American's bandage that had fallen outside. She quickly covered it with dirt before Mr. Tanaka could see. Later, when the others were busy in the main room, she retrieved it, tucking it into her ragged dress beside her silk ribbon. 2 treasures now. 2 reminders that not everything in the world was cruel. You're distracted, Mr. Tanaka said from behind her, making her jump. What are you hiding? Nothing, sir, Hannah replied, lowering her eyes. He grabbed her wrist, twisting until pain shot up her arm. The Americans, did they speak to you yesterday? They looked for soldiers, then left, she said, the practiced emptiness returning to her face. Mr. Tanaka studied her, suspicious. His breath smelled of sake. If I find you've helped the enemy, I'll kill you myself. Japan may fall, but you will never be free. Remember that. He released her with a shove. Hannah stumbled but didn't fall. The black soldiers are animals, he continued. Devils. If they come back, they'll use you and kill you. At least Japanese men treat you as servants of the emperor. Hannah said nothing. She had seen the eyes of both Japanese and American soldiers now. She knew which held more humanity. As Mr. Tanaka walked away, May approached, pretending to sweep nearby. Was it true? May whispered. About the food last night? Hana nodded slightly. Why would they help us? What do they want? Hana had asked herself the same question all night. I don't know, she admitted, but he's coming back tonight. May's eyes widened. You can't trust him. Men are all the same. Maybe, Hana said. But we need help, May. Yuki won't survive another week like this. And what happens when the war ends? What happens to us? The question hung between them, unanswerable. They had been taken from Korea, from China, from Okinawan villages. Their families thought them dead, or worse, dishonored. There was nowhere to return to, no life waiting. That night, as they prepared for sleep, Hana found herself watching the window. Would he come as promised? Part of her hoped he wouldn't. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break you when it inevitably disappeared. But another part, a part she thought had died long ago, strained toward that window like a plant reaching for light. Outside, the rumble of distant artillery vibrated through the walls. Somewhere out there, Isaiah was either fighting or dead, or making his way back to keep a promise Hana wasn't sure she wanted him to keep. She touched the scrap of bandage hidden in her dress, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to hope. Just a little. The evening sky turned deep purple as Isaiah made his way through the trees. Miles and Carter followed silently behind him. They had told their sergeant they were checking the western perimeter, a half-truth that bought them 2 hours. You sure about this? Miles whispered as they paused behind a fallen tree. Distant gunfire echoed from the north, where Marines were still pushing Japanese forces back. Isaiah adjusted the small pack on his shoulder. Inside were bandages, sulfur powder for infections, 3 chocolate bars, and half their rations for the day. I'm sure, he said. You didn't see those women. How they looked at us like we were ghosts. Carter nodded. My mama always said, you can measure a man by what he does when nobody's watching. Well, God's watching us right now. The 3 men moved carefully through the gathering darkness. Isaiah had memorized the route from camp to the comfort station during daylight. Now, with night falling, every shadow looked like a crouching enemy soldier. There, Isaiah whispered, pointing to the dim outline of the concrete building. A single lamp burned in one window. They crouched in the bushes 30 yards away, watching for movement. The area seemed deserted. Most Japanese soldiers had retreated further south, though stragglers still hid in the hills. I'll go first, Isaiah said. Cover me. He crept forward, keeping low. The back door where he'd met Hana before was still damaged. He could see it hanging slightly open. He motioned for Miles and Carter to wait, then slipped inside. The narrow hallway smelled of mold and unwashed bodies. Isaiah moved silently until he reached the main room. 5 shapes lay on thin mats on the floor. He could hear their breathing, quick and shallow, like frightened birds. Hana, he whispered. It's Isaiah. A figure sat up slowly. In the dim light, he could make out her face, the scar across her cheek catching the shadows. Isaiah, she whispered back. He gestured for her to follow him to the back room, away from the others. She hesitated, then rose silently. She wore the same dirty dress as before, her thin shoulders poking through the fabric like wire hangers. In the back room, Isaiah took out his supplies. Her eyes widened at the sight of the food. For you, he said, pointing to her and the other women. And medicine. He mimed cleaning wounds. Hana nodded, understanding. Others, she said in halting English, pointing outside. Friends? Yes, Isaiah replied. My friends, good men. He motioned for her to wait, then went to the back door and signaled Miles and Carter. They slipped inside, carrying more supplies. Hana stared at the 2 new faces, then bowed slightly. Thank you, she said softly. Miles smiled. She speaks English? Just a little, Isaiah replied. Carter handed Hana a small bundle of supplies. The women need to hide these, he whispered. If that Japanese guard finds them, Hana seemed to understand. She took the supplies and tucked them into a loose floorboard that Isaiah hadn't noticed before. Sick, she said, pointing to the main room. Yuki, very sick. She led them back to where the other women lay. One of them, a girl who looked far too young to be in such a place, shivered on her mat despite the warm night. Her forehead glistened with sweat. Miles, whose mother had been a nurse, knelt beside her. He felt her forehead and frowned. Bad fever, he muttered. She needs real medicine. But doctor. Hana watched him with worried eyes. Help? The three soldiers exchanged glances. We need to get them out of here, Isaiah said quietly. All of them. Carter looked nervous. To camp? The officers would have a fit, especially Hayes. Sergeant Torrance is on duty at the medical tent, Isaiah replied. She'd help. She wouldn't turn them away. Miles nodded slowly. 2 nights from now. We'll need a better plan. Suddenly, Hana stiffened. Her hand gripped Isaiah's arm tight enough to hurt. She pointed to the window and whispered something urgent in Japanese. Outside, voices approached. Male voices speaking Japanese. Hide, Hana hissed. Miles and Carter moved immediately to the back room. Isaiah hesitated, looking at the sick girl. Go, Hana insisted, pushing him. He joined the others in the back room just as the front door opened. Through a crack in the door, Isaiah could see a Japanese officer enter. Not the same one as before. This one wore a captain's insignia. Behind him stood 2 soldiers with rifles. The women immediately sat up and bowed their heads. Even the sick girl forced herself upright, though she swayed dangerously. The captain spoke sharply in Japanese. Hana answered, her voice suddenly flat and lifeless. The captain asked something else, looking around suspiciously. Hana shook her head. One of the soldiers moved toward the back room. Isaiah and the others pressed themselves against the wall, barely breathing. Hana said something that made the soldier stop. The captain laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. Isaiah felt his muscles tense. His hand moved to his sidearm. Miles gripped his shoulder, shaking his head firmly. We'll all die, he mouthed silently. And them too. Isaiah knew he was right. But every fiber of his being screamed to intervene. The captain pushed Hana toward the door. She went without resistance, her face a perfect mask. The Japanese soldiers followed, taking Hana with them. The door slammed shut. A lock clicked. The 3 Americans waited, frozen, until the voices and footsteps faded completely. They emerged from the back room to find the 4 remaining women huddled together, looking even more frightened than before. Where did they take her? Isaiah asked, miming walking away. The oldest woman, May, Isaiah had learned her name from Hana, shook her head. Officer, want woman, she said haltingly. Isaiah understood. His jaw tightened. We'll come back, he promised, looking each woman in the eyes. 2 nights. We'll take you to safety. He wasn't sure how much they understood, but he pointed to the moon, then held up 2 fingers. 2 nights. We have to go, Carter urged. Those Japanese soldiers could come back any minute. Reluctantly, Isaiah nodded. They slipped out the back door and into the darkness, moving quietly through the trees back toward camp. Isaiah's thoughts stayed with Hana. Would she return? Would the Japanese captain hurt her badly? The questions burned in his mind as they walked. We're going to need help, Miles said as they approached the American lines. The 3 of us can't do this alone. Torrance, Isaiah replied, and maybe Johnson. He's got access to a jeep. Carter looked doubtful. That's a lot of people to trust with something like this. Something like what? The new voice made them all freeze. Lieutenant Brennan stepped out from behind a supply tent, his pale face ghostly in the darkness. Just talking about patrol routes, sir, Miles said quickly. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You boys are out after curfew. Care to explain why? Night reconnaissance, sir, Isaiah answered. Sergeant Williams approved it. It wasn't entirely a lie. Williams had approved a short perimeter check, just not a 2-hour mission to the comfort station. Brennan studied them for a long moment. I don't like mysteries, Private Ward, and I don't like colored boys who think they can make up their own rules. No, sir, Isaiah replied, keeping his face neutral. Dismissed, Brennan said finally. Report to your tent immediately. The 3 soldiers saluted and walked away. But Isaiah could feel Brennan's eyes on his back. Cold and suspicious. Something told him their problems had just begun. Rain pounded the canvas tent like tiny fists. Isaiah sat on his cot, writing in a small notebook by the light of a single lamp. Around him, other soldiers from the 93rd slept or played quiet card games. The hour was late, but sleep wouldn't come. He'd written the beginnings of a plan for rescuing the women. 2 nights from now, they would need medical supplies, a vehicle, and a way to explain 5 Asian women suddenly appearing at the American camp. Sergeant Torrance was their best hope, a tough-minded nurse who treated black soldiers with the same care she gave white ones. Miles sat down beside him, still damp from the rain. "Any word on Hannah?" he asked quietly. Isaiah shook his head. "Nothing. I tried to get assigned to a patrol near the station today, but Brennan put me on kitchen duty instead." Carter joined them, bringing his blanket to drape over their heads. Under this makeshift tent, they could whisper without being overheard. "Johnson's in," Carter said. "He'll have the Jeep ready after midnight on the day. Says he owes you for saving his hide at Peleliu." Isaiah nodded. "Good. Torrance is on night shift that day too. She'll help." "What about the lieutenant?" Miles asked. "Brennan's been watching us like a hawk." It was true. All day, the white officer had found reasons to appear wherever Isaiah was working. Checking supplies, inspecting the kitchen, always with that cold, suspicious gaze. "We stick to the plan," Isaiah said firmly. "Those women won't survive much longer in that place, especially not the sick one." Rain drummed harder on the canvas above. In the dim light, Isaiah could see the doubt on his friends' faces. "Look," he said, "I understand if you want to back out. This isn't your fight." Miles shook his head. "My mama raised me better than that. I'm in." "Me too," Carter agreed. "But we need to be smart about this. Brennan's looking for any excuse to court-martial us." Isaiah nodded grimly. Colored soldiers were held to a different standard. He'd seen it time and again. White soldiers got away with all kinds of rule-breaking, but black soldiers faced the harshest punishments for the smallest infractions. "Here's what we'll do," Isaiah said, lowering his voice further. "After lights out, we slip out separately. Meet at the broken Jeep behind the supply depot. From there A shadow fell across the entrance to their tent. All 3 men looked up to see Lieutenant Brennan standing there, water dripping from his rain poncho. "Lights out was 10 minutes ago," he said coldly. "What are you discussing so intensely, Private Ward?" Isaiah closed his notebook casually. "Just sharing stories from home, sir. My sister's expecting a baby soon." Brennan's eyes dropped to the notebook. "I'm sure that requires detailed notes." He held out his hand. "Let me see that." Isaiah hesitated, then handed over the small book. Brennan flipped through it, his expression darkening as he read Isaiah's careful handwriting. Most pages contained innocent things, letters to family, Bible verses, a few rough sketches of the Okinawan landscape. But the newest entry, with its half-formed rescue plan. Brennan's face revealed nothing as he handed the notebook back. "Interesting reading, Private," he said. "Very creative." He turned to leave, then paused at the tent entrance. "Remember, soldiers from this unit are restricted to camp unless on official duty. Anyone caught outside the perimeter without orders will face severe consequences." After he left, Carter exhaled slowly. "He knows something, but not everything," Isaiah replied. "He saw some notes, but nothing specific." Miles looked worried. "Maybe we should wait. Try again when things cool down." Isaiah shook his head. "We told them 2 nights. They'll be waiting, counting on us." He thought of Hannah, of the trust beginning to form in her eyes. "We can't let them down." They stayed awake long after the lamp was extinguished, whispering plans in the darkness. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away footprints, smoothing the churned earth of war into blank mud. In 2 days' time, they would risk everything to save 5 women they barely knew. As Isaiah finally drifted toward sleep, he wondered if Hannah had returned to the comfort station. He pictured her face, with that long scar across her cheek, not a disfigurement, but a map of survival. She had endured so much already. She just needed to hold on a little longer. In his dreams, he saw her standing on a hillside, her faded red ribbon fluttering in her hand like a tiny flag of defiance. Morning brought watery sunshine and the constant, distant thump of artillery. Hana stood in line with the other women, waiting for the daily rice ration. Her body ached from the previous night, but her face revealed nothing. The Japanese captain had returned her to the comfort station just before dawn. Mr. Tanaka had been waiting, his narrow face pinched with anger at having one of his women taken without permission. But there was nothing he could do. The captain outranked him. Yuki leaned heavily against Hana, still burning with fever. The girl had grown worse overnight, her breathing shallow and labored. Without real medicine, she wouldn't last another week. Mr. Tanaka measured rice into their bowls with a wooden scoop. As always, he gave them barely enough to stay alive, just a few spoonfuls each of watery gruel. "Eat quickly," he ordered. "Officers arriving this afternoon. Everything must be clean." Hana guided Yuki to the corner where they usually ate. The youngest girl could barely hold her bowl without spilling. May joined them, her eyes darting nervously to the door. "Did you see them?" she whispered. "The black soldiers?" Hana nodded slightly, careful that Mr. Tanaka couldn't see their conversation. "They're coming back," she said softly in Korean. "2 nights from now. They want to take us away from here." May's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Away? To where?" "To their camp. They have doctors." "It's a trap," Ume said from nearby. The quiet woman rarely spoke, but when she did, her words carried weight. Men are men, Japanese or American. They want the same thing. Hana thought of Isaiah, the gentle way he had treated her wound, how he had kept his distance, respecting her fear. "I don't think so," she said. "They could have taken what they wanted already." "They didn't," May frowned. "Even if they mean well, it's too dangerous. If we're caught trying to escape..." She didn't need to finish. They all knew the punishment would be death, probably after hours of torture as an example to others. "Yuki will die if she stays here," Hana said simply. "Look at her." They all glanced at the feverish girl. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale beneath its natural golden tone. "I'm going with them," Hana continued. "Whether you come is your choice." Ume studied her closely. "You trust these men? After everything?" Hana considered the question. Trust was a luxury she had abandoned long ago, like so many other things. Dignity, hope, the belief that life could ever be normal again. "I trust them more than I trust staying here," she finally answered. They ate the rest of their meager meal in silence. When they finished, Mr. Tanaka set them to cleaning, scrubbing floors, washing the thin sleeping mats, dusting the few pieces of furniture. The work was exhausting, especially for Yuki, who could barely stand. As Hana cleaned near the window, she caught a glimpse of movement on the road outside. A patrol of American soldiers walked past, their helmets distinctive in the morning light. Among them, she recognized Isaiah's tall figure. Their eyes met briefly before he continued on, his face revealing nothing. That small moment of connection gave Hana strength as the day wore on. 2 nights. They just needed to survive 2 more nights. Later, as they prepared the room for visiting officers, May approached Hana again. "If we go with them," she whispered, "what happens after? Where would we go? Our families think we're dead, or worse." It was a question Hana hadn't allowed herself to consider. Like the others, she had been taken from her village in Korea 2 years ago. The Japanese soldiers had killed her father when he tried to protect her. Her mother and younger brothers had been forced to watch as she was dragged away. Even if she somehow survived this war, what life awaited her? A woman who had been used by so many men was considered soiled, worthless. There would be no marriage, no children, no place in society. "I don't know," she admitted, "but anything must be better than dying here." May seemed unconvinced, but she nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That night, as they lay on their thin mats, Hana watched moonlight creep across the floor. One more day, one more night. Then whatever would happen, would happen. Beside her, Yuki's breathing had grown more labored. Hana placed a cool cloth on the girl's forehead and whispered comfort in her ear. Whether in Korean or Japanese didn't matter anymore. The girl was beyond understanding words. Only the tone of human kindness could reach her now. Hana touched the silk ribbon hidden in her dress, along with the scrap of Isaiah's bandage. Two treasures. Two reasons to believe that not everything beautiful had been destroyed by war. "Hold on, Yuki," she whispered. "Just a little longer." The afternoon sun beat down on Isaiah's neck as he cleaned his rifle. Around him, other soldiers from the 93rd prepared for patrol, checking ammunition, adjusting helmets, smoking last cigarettes before heading out. The air hung heavy with humidity and the distant smell of smoke. Lieutenant Brennan strode into the clearing, clipboard in hand. The white officer's face was taut with purpose. "Squad assignments for evening patrol," he announced, eyes scanning the gathered men. "Davis, Harrison, Johnson, North Sector. Williams, Peterson, Thomas, East Perimeter." Isaiah kept his face neutral as he waited for his name. This patrol would determine whether their rescue plan could proceed tonight. "Ward, Miles, Carter, Southern Approach, Route 16. Isaiah's stomach tightened. Route 16 ran directly past the comfort station. Of all the patrol routes, Brennan had assigned them to the very one that overlapped with their planned rescue path. Miles and Carter exchanged quick glances. This was no coincidence. "Questions?" Brennan asked, his eyes fixed on Isaiah. "No, sir," Isaiah replied evenly. "Good. Patrols depart at 1700 hours. Return by 20,000 hours. No exceptions." As Brennan walked away, Carter moved closer to Isaiah. "This ain't chance," he muttered. "He's setting us up." Isaiah nodded slightly. "He suspects something, but he doesn't know for sure." "What do we do?" Miles asked. Tonight was the plan. Isaiah checked that no one was within earshot. "We do the patrol exactly as ordered. Return to camp on time. Then we wait until midnight and proceed as planned." Carter shook his head. "He'll be watching us like hawks, might even have someone following us." "We need to warn the women," Isaiah said. "Tell them we're delayed one night." Miles frowned. "How? We can't break away during patrol, not with Brennan suspicious already." Isaiah thought for a moment. "I'll figure something out." At 5 o'clock sharp, they set out. Isaiah led their three-man squad along the designated route, moving with practiced caution through the battered landscape. Okinawa had once been beautiful, he imagined, with green hills and clear streams. Now it was a moonscape of bomb craters, splintered trees, and abandoned villages. As they approached the area near the comfort station, Isaiah felt his pulse quicken. How could he pass a message without alerting his companions to his real purpose? The answer came as they rounded a bend in the road. A small group of Okinawan civilians appeared ahead, old men and women salvaging belongings from a damaged house. Such encounters were common. Local people were caught between retreating Japanese forces and advancing Americans. Isaiah signaled for Miles and Carter to hold position while he approached the civilians. Standard procedure was to check for weapons, then move on. "I'll handle this," he told the others. "Cover me." He walked toward the Okinawans with his rifle lowered. The elderly people looked up fearfully as he approached. "It's okay," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Just checking." Among the group was a boy of about 12. Isaiah noticed him watching with more curiosity than fear. "You speak English?" Isaiah asked the boy. The child nodded slightly. "Little," he said. Isaiah glanced back at Miles and Carter, who were scanning the area, not paying close attention to his conversation. He knelt to the boy's level. "Near here," he said slowly, "building with women inside. Japanese guards." He mimed a small building with his hands. The boy's eyes flickered with recognition. "Hi," he said. "Yes." "Message," Isaiah continued, keeping his voice low. "Friends come tomorrow night, not tonight." He held up one finger, then two. "Tomorrow." He couldn't tell if the boy understood completely, but the child nodded seriously. Isaiah reached into his pocket and removed a chocolate bar, his last one. "For you," he said, handing it to the boy. "And for them." He added a small roll of bandages. "Women." The boy took the items, tucking them quickly into his tattered shirt. He gave a small bow. Isaiah straightened and rejoined Miles and Carter. "All clear," he said, "just locals." They continued their patrol. When they passed the turnoff that led to the comfort station, Isaiah kept his eyes forward, though every instinct told him to check if Hana had returned, if Yuki still lived. He could only hope the boy would deliver his message. An hour later, as they returned to camp, Isaiah noticed Lieutenant Brennan waiting near the checkpoint. The officer watched them closely as they signed in their weapons. "Right on time, Private Ward," Brennan said. "How was patrol?" "Quiet, sir," Isaiah replied. "Saw some civilians near the East Fork. Nothing unusual." Brennan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Nothing at all worth reporting?" "No, sir. Just the usual. Bombed-out buildings, civilian scavenging." The lieutenant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know what you're planning, Ward. I don't know exactly what. But I know it involves going off limits. Whatever heroics you have in mind, forget them." Isaiah met his gaze steadily. "Just doing my duty, sir. Following orders." "See that you do." Brennan glanced at Miles and Carter. "All of you." After they were dismissed, the three friends walked toward the mess tent, keeping their conversation casual, aware they might still be watched. "Did you manage anything?" Miles whispered as they collected their dinner trays. Isaiah nodded slightly. "Maybe. Found a local boy who might carry a message." "Might?" Carter looked skeptical. "That's a thin hope." "It's all we have," Isaiah replied. "We stick to the plan, just one day later." They ate quickly, discussing ordinary things. Baseball scores from before they deployed, letters from home, complaints about the food. All the while, Isaiah felt Brennan's attention on them from across the tent. As darkness fell, Isaiah was ordered to report to the lieutenant's tent. He walked across the compound with a sense of dread building in his chest. Brennan sat at a small desk, writing in a logbook by lamplight. He didn't look up when Isaiah entered. "Private Ward," he said finally, "I've been reviewing your service record." Isaiah stood at attention, saying nothing. "Impressive performance at Peleliu. Commendations for bravery under fire." Brennan closed the logbook. "Which makes your current behavior all the more disappointing." "Sir?" "Don't play dumb, Ward. You and your friends are planning something unauthorized. I want to know what." Isaiah kept his face neutral. "I don't understand, sir." Brennan's expression hardened. "The 93rd is already viewed with skepticism by command. Colored units are held to a higher standard. You know that. Whatever you're planning could jeopardize your entire division." The truth of these words stung. Black soldiers walked a tightrope every day, fighting for a country that treated them as second-class citizens, serving under officers who often didn't want them there. "I intend to follow all orders, sir," Isaiah said carefully. "Good," Brennan replied. "Because effective immediately, you and Privates Miles and Carter are restricted to camp for the next 72 hours, except for assigned duties under direct supervision." Isaiah felt his stomach drop. "May I ask why, sir?" "Consider it a precaution, Ward. I don't make accusations without evidence, but I trust my instincts. You're dismissed." Isaiah saluted and turned to leave, his mind racing. Restricted to camp, under supervision. Their rescue plan had just become much more complicated. At the tent entrance, Brennan called after him. "One more thing, Ward." Isaiah turned back. "Sir?" "Whatever you think you're doing, whatever cause you believe you're serving, remember your duty is to your unit first. Don't throw away your career for distractions." The implication was clear. Somehow, Brennan had connected Isaiah to the comfort station, to Hana and the others. But how much did he actually know? "Understood, sir," Isaiah said and stepped out into the darkness. His chest felt tight as he walked back to his tent. They were running out of options and out of time. The boy might or might not deliver his message. The women would be expecting rescue tomorrow night. And now, He, Miles, and Carter were effectively under house arrest. He found his friends waiting anxiously behind the supply tent. "We're restricted to camp," Isaiah told them. "Next 72 hours," Carter swore quietly. "What now?" Isaiah took a deep breath. "We need help, someone who can move freely." "Johnson?" Miles suggested. "Too risky for him alone," Isaiah replied. "But there is one person who might be able to help." "Who?" "Sergeant Torrance. She has medical clearance to move between areas, and she already knows about our plan." Miles looked skeptical. "You're asking a lot of her." "I know," Isaiah said, "but those women don't have many days left, especially not Yuki." He thought of Hana, waiting for him to keep his promise. She had trusted him when trust must have seemed impossible. He couldn't fail her now. "I'll talk to Torrance tonight," he decided. "If she agrees, we adapt the plan." Carter nodded slowly. "And if she doesn't?" Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Then I go alone, restriction or not." As they separated to avoid suspicion, Isaiah felt the weight of his promise to Hana like a physical burden. 2 nights, he had told her. 2 nights until rescue. Now that promise hung by a thread. He touched the place in his pocket where he kept his mother's last letter. She had raised him to keep his word, no matter the cost. Some things were worth risking everything for. The women at the comfort station were counting on him, and Isaiah Ward did not intend to let them down. The medical tent glowed like a paper lantern in the darkness. Inside, shadows moved across the canvas walls as nurses tended to the wounded. Isaiah approached cautiously. Aware that his restriction to camp didn't technically forbid visiting the medical area yet, Sergeant Leela Torrance emerged from the tent, wiping her hands on a towel. In her early 30s, with deep brown skin and eyes that missed nothing, she had earned respect from doctors and patients alike through sheer competence. As one of the few black nurses allowed to serve overseas, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "Private Ward," she said, noticing him. "You look healthy to me. What brings you to my hospital?" "Need to speak with you, ma'am," Isaiah replied, privately. Torrance studied his face, then nodded toward a bench beside the supply shed. 5 minutes, that's all I can spare." Once seated, Isaiah explained the situation quickly. The women at the comfort station, Yuki's worsening condition, their thwarted rescue plan, and Brennan's restrictions. Torrance listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "These women," she said when he finished. "You're certain they want to leave? Sometimes captives become attached to their situation, fear the unknown more than the familiar suffering." "Hana wants to leave," Isaiah replied. "She's ready. The others are afraid, but that fever case, Yuki, she'll die without proper care." Torrance folded her arms. "And Lieutenant Brennan is watching you." "Yes, ma'am." "What exactly are you asking me to do, Private?" Isaiah took a deep breath. "We need someone who can move freely, someone who can get a message to them, then help bring them to safety when the time comes." "You're asking me to risk my commission," she said flatly. "Do you understand what it took for a colored woman to become an Army nurse? How many doors were slammed in my face?" "I do understand, ma'am," Isaiah said quietly, "and I wouldn't ask if lives weren't at stake." Torrance was silent for a long moment, staring into the darkness. Finally, she sighed. "My grandmother was born a slave," she said. "When she was 14, a Union soldier helped her escape to the north. She never knew his name, never saw him again. But she named her first son after him anyway." She turned to Isaiah. "Some debts can never be repaid directly. They can only be passed forward." Isaiah waited, hardly daring to hope. "I'll help," she said finally, "but we do this my way. No cowboy heroics, no unnecessary risks." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Don't thank me yet," she replied grimly. "This could end badly for all of us." They quickly formed a new plan. Torrance had authorization to conduct public health inspections of local areas, officially to prevent disease outbreaks that might affect troops. She would visit the comfort station tomorrow, assess the women's conditions, and explain the adjusted rescue plan. "I'll bring basic medication for the fever case," she said. "Enough to keep her stable. Then tomorrow night after midnight, I'll return with a medical transport, authorized to transfer infectious patients to isolation." Isaiah nodded. "The others and I will create a diversion at camp to draw Brennan's attention away from the southern perimeter. And when these women reach camp, what then?" It was the question that had troubled Isaiah from the beginning. Johnson can get them to the coastal village where the aid organizations are working. The Red Cross has been evacuating civilians. Torrance looked skeptical. "These aren't just any civilians, Ward. They're comfort women. The stigma. They deserve a chance," Isaiah said firmly. "That's all. A chance to decide their own futures." "Agreed," Torrance replied. "But be prepared. Saving them from that place is only the first step. What comes after may be just as difficult." As they finished their conversation, a voice called from the medical tent. "Sergeant Torrance, we need you. The chest wound is bleeding again." "Coming," she called back. Then to Isaiah, "Tomorrow, stay clear of Brennan, and pray this works." She hurried back to the tent, her silhouette merging with the other shadows moving urgently inside. Isaiah made his way back to his own tent, careful to avoid the sentry posts where he might be questioned. The night had grown chilly, unusual for Okinawa in spring. Or perhaps it was just the weight of tomorrow's risk that made him shiver. Inside the tent, Miles and Carter were playing cards by the dim light of a covered lamp. Other soldiers slept nearby, their breathing forming a gentle chorus of exhaustion. "Well?" Miles whispered as Isaiah sat on his cot. "Torrance is in," Isaiah replied softly. "She'll go tomorrow, then arrange transport tomorrow night." Carter laid down his cards. "In our part? Diversion. Something to keep Brennan and the sentries looking the other way." They spoke in whispers for another hour, refining details, considering contingencies. What if Tanaka refused to let Torrance see the women? What if the Japanese sent reinforcements to the area? What if Brennan discovered their plan despite the diversion? Every question led to more questions, more uncertainties. But they had come too far to turn back now. As they finally prepared to sleep, Miles asked the question that had been hanging unspoken between them. "If this goes wrong, if we're caught, what happens?" Isaiah stared at the dark canvas above his cot. "Court-martial, probably. Dishonorable discharge at best." "And at worst?" Carter pressed. Isaiah didn't answer immediately. "Disobeying orders in a war zone could carry the severest penalties. We knew the risks when we started," he said finally. Miles nodded slowly. "My father fought in the last war, came home with medals, still had to use the colored entrance at the train station." He shuffled the deck of cards absently. "He told me, 'Son, sometimes you have to decide what kind of world you want to live in, then act like it already exists.'" "Wise man," Isaiah said. "Yeah," Miles agreed. He also said, "Don't be stupid about it." He grinned suddenly, breaking the tension. They all laughed quietly, the sound muffled by cupped hands and the night around them. Later, as the others slept, Isaiah lay awake, thinking of Hana. What would happen to her after the rescue? Where would she go? These questions had no easy answers, but they haunted him nonetheless. He thought of his mother and sisters back in Georgia, of the small house with its vegetable garden and front porch swing. His family had little, but they had dignity, community, faith. Hana had been stripped of everything: home, family, even her sense of self. Isaiah turned on his side, pulling his thin blanket closer. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or disaster. There would be no middle ground. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Hana's faded red ribbon. He had seen her clutching it that first day, like a drowning person holding a lifeline. Everyone needed something to hold on to, he supposed. Some reminder that beauty once existed and might exist again. For Isaiah, that something had become the promise he'd made to 5 women in a comfort station on a war-torn island. A promise of rescue, of hope, of human decency in a world gone mad. Tomorrow, that promise would either be kept or broken, and lives, including his own, hung in the balance. Mr. Tanaka left at sunset, locking the door behind him. It wasn't unusual. He often disappeared in the evenings, returning later with alcohol on his breath. The women had learned that his absences were not freedom. The locks remained, and Japanese soldiers still patrolled nearby. Hana sat beside Yuki, bathing the girl's forehead with a damp cloth. The fever burned hotter each hour. Yuki's breathing had grown shallow and rapid, her thin chest rising and falling like a frightened bird's. "Hold on," Hana whispered, "just until tomorrow night." She didn't know if Isaiah's message had reached them. The boy hadn't come, or if he hadn't been able to reach the women inside. They were still preparing for tonight, the second night as originally planned. May knelt beside them, her face troubled. "She needs more than cloths," she said quietly. "Real medicine." "Tomorrow," Hana replied. "If they come." "If," May repeated, the word heavy with doubt. Outside, voices approached, men speaking Japanese. The women tensed, preparing for Mr. Tanaka's return, or worse, visiting soldiers. But the footsteps stopped short of their door. Through the thin walls, they could hear a conversation. "Ordered to destroy the documents before withdrawal," one voice said. "All of them?" asked another. "Everything that could embarrass the emperor, especially these places." Hana and May exchanged glances. Ume and Kimiko, the quietest of the five, moved closer to listen. "What about the women?" the second voice asked. A pause. "Same orders. No witnesses, no evidence." Hana's blood turned cold. She had suspected this might be coming. As American forces pushed the Japanese back, the comfort stations became dangerous evidence of military policy. Evidence the high command would want erased. "When?" asked the second voice. 2 days. Maybe 3. They're sending a special unit." The soldiers moved on, their voices fading into the night. Silence fell inside the comfort station. Even Yuki's labored breathing seemed quieter, as if the girl sensed the shadow that had fallen over them. "They're going to kill us," Ume said flatly. No one contradicted her. They had all known this possibility existed from the moment the Americans landed on Okinawa. May turned to Hana. "You're American soldier. He's coming tomorrow?" "Yes," Hana said, hoping it was still true. "Tomorrow night." "It might be too late," Kimiko said, speaking for the first time in days. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "If these special units arrive before then—" A soft scraping sound at the window interrupted her. They froze, staring at the wooden shutters. When the sound came again, Hana rose cautiously and approached. "Who's there?" she whispered in Japanese. "Friend," came the reply in English. "From Isaiah." Hana's heart leapt. She worked quickly to loosen the shutter, which opened outward. In the darkness, she could make out a face, not Isaiah's, but the other soldier, the one called Miles. "Isaiah sent me," he said softly. "Change of plans." Hana struggled to understand his English. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Not tonight?" Miles nodded. "Tomorrow night. But a woman, a doctor, will come first, in morning." "Doctor?" Hana repeated. She pointed to Yuki. "For her? Sick?" Miles peered through the window at the feverish girl. "Yes, for her." He handed Hana a small package through the gap. "Medicine. For fever. Little bit now. More tomorrow." Inside the package, Hana found pills and a small bottle of liquid. She recognized aspirin tablets, but the liquid was unfamiliar. "How much?" she asked. "For her?" Miles mimed breaking a pill in half, then swallowing. "Half now, half tomorrow." For the liquid, he indicated just a small amount on a cloth. "For head. Cool." Hana nodded her understanding. "What happened? Why tomorrow?" Miles glanced over his shoulder nervously. "Lieutenant watching. Isaiah, not allowed to leave camp." This was more difficult for Hana to understand. She frowned, trying to piece together his meaning. "Isaiah come tomorrow?" she asked. "Promise?" "Yes." Miles assured her. "Different plan. Woman doctor first. Then night, all of you leave. May had joined Hana at the window. Ask him about the special unit, she whispered in Korean. The ones coming to kill us. Hana struggled to translate the concept. Japanese soldiers, she said to Miles, coming soon, to kill women. Miles's eyes widened. When? 2 days, maybe 3. He looked grim. Tell Isaiah, Hana continued. Must hurry. I will, Miles promised. Be ready tomorrow night. Late. Midnight. He disappeared into the darkness as quickly as he had come. Hana secured the shutter and returned to the others, who had gathered around Yuki. What did he say? Ume demanded. Hana explained the change of plans, the doctor who would come tomorrow, and the rescue still planned for tomorrow night. Then she told them about the medicine. Can we trust it? May asked, eyeing the pill suspiciously. What choice do we have? Hana replied. Yuki will die without help. She broke an aspirin tablet in half and gently lifted Yuki's head. Yuki, you need to swallow this. It will help the fever. The girl's eyes fluttered open, glazed with sickness. She obediently swallowed the half-tablet with a sip of water, then closed her eyes again. Hana dampened a cloth with the liquid from the bottle. Alcohol, she realized from the smell, and placed it on Yuki's forehead. The girl sighed slightly at the cooling sensation. Now we wait, Hana said. For what? Ume asked bitterly. Death or rescue? Which comes first? Hana had no answer. She looked at each woman's face in the dim light. May, strong and practical. Ume, bitter but surviving. Kimiko, retreated into silence. And Yuki, barely more than a child. They had become her family in this place of suffering. The only people who understood what she had endured, because they had endured it too. If the Americans come, she said finally, I'm going with them, even if it's dangerous, even if we might be caught. And if they don't come? May asked. Hana touched the faded ribbon hidden in her dress. Then we die as ourselves, not as Japan's slaves. One by one the women nodded. Even Ume, with her deep distrust, seemed to accept this choice. What was death, after all, compared to the living hell they had already survived? Hana settled beside Yuki again, continuing to bathe her face with the cooling liquid. By midnight, the girl's fever seemed slightly less intense. The medicine was working, at least a little. Hold on, Yuki, Hana whispered. Just one more day. Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, casting the room into deeper darkness. Somewhere to the north, artillery fire flashed against the sky like distant lightning. The war continued its relentless advance, bringing with it either doom or deliverance. For the women of the comfort station, tomorrow would bring one or the other. There would be no middle ground. A light rain fell as Isaiah, Miles, and Carter met behind the supply tent. The hour was just past midnight, the moment when guard changes and the natural exhaustion of centuries created small gaps in the camp's security. They had waited an extra day as planned. Now, it was time. Torrance visited them this morning, Miles reported in a whisper. Got antibiotics into the sick one. Says she's a little better, but still critical. Isaiah nodded. Transport? Ready. Medical jeep with stretcher. Parked by the south checkpoint. Carter kept watch at the edge of the tent. Brennan's with the captain, he reported. Should be occupied for at least 20 minutes. Their diversion had worked perfectly. An anonymous tip about possible Japanese infiltrators near the north perimeter had drawn attention and resources away from their escape route. Now they had a narrow window to act. The women know the plan? Isaiah asked. Miles nodded. Torrance explained everything. They'll be waiting. Let's move. They slipped through the shadows, using the rain and darkness as cover. The muddy ground swallowed their footsteps as they approached the south checkpoint. Sergeant Torrance waited beside the medical jeep, her nurse's cape pulled tight against the rain. You're late, she whispered as they approached. Had to wait for Brennan to leave, Isaiah replied. Johnson is covering my shift at the hospital, Torrance said. That gives us 2 hours at most. They climbed into the jeep, Torrance driving, Isaiah beside her, Miles and Carter in the back. The vehicle had been marked with medical corps symbols, which would explain their movement if they were stopped. The sentry at the checkpoint barely glanced at the paperwork Torrance presented. A colored nurse and 3 colored soldiers on a late-night medical errand weren't interesting enough to delay in the rain. Once past the checkpoint, Torrance drove with her headlights dimmed to narrow slits. The road to the comfort station was rutted and washed out in places, forcing them to move slowly. "Miles told me about the Japanese special unit," Isaiah said quietly. "The ones coming to eliminate evidence." Torrance's hands tightened on the steering wheel. All the more reason to hurry. They left the Jeep hidden in a grove of trees about 50 yards from the comfort station. The small concrete building sat dark and silent in the rainy night. No light shone from the windows. "I'll go first," Isaiah said. "Make sure it's clear." He moved through the wet grass, alert for any sign of Japanese patrols. When he reached the building, he tapped gently on the back door. 3 times. Pause. Then twice more. The signal they had arranged with Torrance's morning visit. The door opened immediately. Hana stood there, her thin face resolved. "You came," she said simply. "I promised," Isaiah replied. Behind her, the other women waited, huddled together. Yuki lay on a makeshift stretcher, a door panel, carried by Mei and Umi. The girl looked barely alive, her breathing shallow despite the medicine Torrance had brought earlier. "We must hurry," Hana said. "Mr. Tanaka will return soon." Isaiah motioned for the others to approach. Carter and Miles helped with Yuki's stretcher while Torrance quickly checked each woman's condition. "Can they all walk?" Isaiah asked. "Yes," Hana replied. "We are stronger than we look." They had just started toward the door when a sharp voice cut through the darkness. "Stop right there!" Mr. Tanaka stood in the doorway, a pistol in his hand. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform rumpled. He swayed slightly, drunk, but not enough to make him harmless. "Traitors," he spat in broken English. "Whores of America now?" Isaiah moved slowly, positioning himself between Tanaka and the women. "Put the gun down," he said calmly. "No one needs to get hurt." Tanaka's laugh was brittle. "Too late for that. Japan losing war, but keep honor. No surrender." He aimed the pistol at Hana. "She dies first. Example." What happened next unfolded in seconds. Carter, who had been nearest the door, launched himself at Tanaka. The gun went off, a deafening crack in the small room. Carter fell, clutching his arm. Tanaka stumbled, but kept his footing, swinging the gun toward Isaiah. Before he could fire again, Miles tackled him from the side. The 2 men crashed into the wall, struggling for the weapon. Another shot, wild, splintering wood above their heads. Isaiah joined the fight, grabbing Tanaka's gun hand and forcing it upward. The Japanese man was smaller, but fought with desperate strength. He got a hand free and clawed at Isaiah's face, aiming for his eyes. "Go!" Isaiah shouted to the women. "Get to the Jeep!" Torrance was already moving, herding them toward the door. "This way!" Hana hesitated, watching the struggle. Her eyes met Isaiah's for a split second, fear and concern in her gaze. "Go!" he repeated. The women fled, carrying Yuki between them. Torrance helped Carter, who was bleeding but able to walk. Isaiah and Miles continued to struggle with Tanaka. The gun fired again, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. Then, with a sudden twist, Miles wrenched the weapon free. It clattered to the floor. Tanaka howled with rage and despair. "Kill me," he demanded. "Honor demands it." Isaiah stepped back, breathing hard. "We're not here to kill anyone." Miles picked up the gun and emptied the bullets into his pocket. "Let's go." They left Tanaka sitting against the wall, his face a mask of defeat and hatred. Outside, a flare burst in the distance, illuminating the landscape with ghostly light. The women were already halfway to the Jeep, moving as quickly as they could with their injured and ill. "Hurry," Isaiah urged as he and Miles caught up. That gunfire might attract attention. They reached the Jeep just as another flare lit the sky. This one was closer, followed by the sound of gunfire, an American patrol engaging Japanese forces somewhere to the east. "That's our way back," Torrance said grimly. "We need another route." Isaiah thought quickly. "The stream bed. It runs behind the camp. We can follow it to the south entrance." They helped the women into the Jeep, Yuki laid carefully across the back with Kimiko supporting her head. Carter's arm was bleeding steadily, the bullet having grazed his bicep. "I'm fine," he insisted as Torrance wrapped a quick field dressing around the wound. "Just get us moving." Isaiah took the wheel this time, with Torrance beside him to monitor Yuki. The Jeep lurched forward on the muddy track, away from the comfort station and the sound of fighting. In the rearview mirror, Isaiah caught a glimpse of Hana's face, tense but determined. She sat with her arm protectively around Yuki, the other hand gripping the side of the Jeep as it bounced over rough ground. They had done it. The women were free. Now they just had to make it safely back to camp. The hillside path narrowed dangerously, forcing Isaiah to slow the Jeep to a crawl. Rain continued to fall, turning the dirt track into slick mud that threatened to send them sliding into the ravine below. Above the engine's rumble, they could hear sporadic gunfire from the east. The engagement was spreading. "How much farther?" Miles asked, peering anxiously through the rain-streaked windshield. "Half-mile to the stream crossing," Isaiah replied. "Then another mile to the South Camp entrance." In the back, Torrance monitored Yuki's condition. The girl had fallen unconscious during the escape, her breathing becoming more labored despite the medicine. "We need to hurry," Torrance said. "She's failing." Hana sat beside Yuki, holding her hand, whispering encouragement in Korean that the girl couldn't hear. The other women huddled close, their thin bodies shivering in the night air. Carter, his wounded arm bound tightly, kept watch for patrols. "Movement at 2 o'clock, he reported suddenly. "In the trees." Isaiah cut the engine immediately. They sat in silence, straining to see through the darkness and rain. Shapes moved among the distant pines, soldiers advancing in formation. "Japanese or American?" Miles whispered. "Can't tell," Carter replied. "Too far." Isaiah made a quick decision. "We can't risk the road. We'll have to go on foot from here." They helped the women from the Jeep, supporting those who were weakest. Miles and Carter took the ends of Yuki's makeshift stretcher. Torrance gathered her medical bag, and Isaiah led the way, guiding them into the shelter of the forest. "Stay close," he instructed. "Single file, step where I step." They moved slowly through the underbrush, the wet leaves muffling their footsteps. The rain had lessened to a fine mist, but water still dripped from every branch, soaking through their clothes. Hana walked directly behind Isaiah, her steps sure despite her weakness. Occasionally, their hands would brush as he helped her over fallen logs or across slippery rocks. Each time, he felt a jolt of awareness, of her strength, her determination, her quiet dignity. They had gone perhaps a quarter mile when the forest erupted in gunfire ahead of them. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness, accompanied by shouts in Japanese and English. They had stumbled into the edge of a firefight between retreating Japanese forces and advancing Americans. "Down," Isaiah ordered, dropping to his stomach behind a fallen tree. The others followed suit, pressing themselves into the wet earth. Bullets whined overhead, splintering bark and shattering branches. Yuki lay between Miles and Carter, who had positioned themselves to shield her body. May and Ume clung to each other, eyes wide with terror. Kimiko had frozen completely, her face a mask of shock. But it was Hana who worried Isaiah most. She had gone rigid, her breathing shallow and rapid, her eyes unfocused, lost in some internal horror. Isaiah moved closer to her. "Hana," he whispered, "look at me." She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the flashing gunfire ahead. Her hands were clenched so tightly that her knuckles showed white even in the darkness. Gently, Isaiah placed his hand over hers. "Hana," he repeated, "you're safe. I'm here." Slowly, her eyes focused on his face. A tremor ran through her body. "Guns," she whispered. "Like when they came for me, when they killed my father." Isaiah understood then. The gunfire had triggered memories of her capture, of the day her life had been destroyed. His heart ached for her, for all she had endured. "I know," he said softly, "but we're going to make it through this, together." His hand remained over hers, steady and warm despite the cold rain. Gradually, her breathing slowed. Her fingers relaxed slightly beneath his. The firefight continued for what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of rain and an occasional moan from the wounded. "American Patrol 1, Carter whispered after listening intently. "Japanese retreating east." Isaiah nodded. "We need to identify ourselves before the patrol moves this way. They'll shoot anything that moves." He turned to the group. "Stay here. I'll make contact." "Too safer," Miles said. "Too safer." They crawled forward through the underbrush until they could see the American soldiers, a squad from the 5th Marines, moving cautiously through the trees, checking Japanese bodies. Isaiah stood slowly, hands raised. "Friendly," he called. "93rd Infantry." The Marines swung their rifles toward the sound, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Step forward," a voice ordered. Slowly, Isaiah and Miles emerged from the trees, hands still raised. The Marines relaxed slightly when they saw the American uniforms. "What are you doing out here?" the sergeant in charge demanded. "This area's not secured." "Medical evacuation," Isaiah replied, gesturing back toward their hidden group. "We have wounded and civilians." The sergeant frowned. "Civilians? What civilians?" "Women," Miles explained. "Japanese captives. One's critical." The sergeant studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Show me." Isaiah led him back to where the others waited. When the sergeant's flashlight illuminated the huddled women and Carter's bloodied arm, his expression softened slightly. "Comfort station?" he asked quietly. Isaiah nodded. The sergeant sighed. "Found another one last week. Ugly business." He turned to his radio man. "Call it in. Tell them we're escorting medical evac with civilians." To Isaiah, he said, "We'll get you to the south checkpoint. From there, you're on your own." "Thank you, Sergeant," Isaiah replied. They regrouped quickly. The Marines formed a protective perimeter as they moved through the forest, following a route that avoided the worst of the battlefield. Yuki was transferred to a proper stretcher provided by the Marines' corpsman, who gave her an injection of morphine to ease her labored breathing. As they walked, Isaiah found himself beside Hana again. She moved mechanically, exhaustion evident in every step. "Almost there," he encouraged her. "Just a little farther." She nodded without speaking, saving her strength for the journey. But after a few more steps, she stumbled. Isaiah caught her arm, steadying her. "I can carry you," he offered. "No," she said firmly. "I walk, on my own feet." Isaiah understood, after years of being treated as less than human, her dignity, her ability to stand on her own, was perhaps her most precious possession. "Then lean on me," he said. "Just a little. Friends help each other." After a moment's hesitation, she allowed her weight to shift slightly against his side. Together, they continued through the rain-soaked forest, toward whatever future awaited them at the American camp. The Marine escort left them at the tree line, 100 yards from the south checkpoint of the American camp. Lights glowed through the misty darkness, searchlights, guard posts, the dull yellow of tent flaps illuminated from within. "This is as far as we go," the Marine sergeant said. "Good luck." Isaiah nodded his thanks, and the Marines melted back into the forest, continuing their patrol. Now the difficult part began, getting the women into camp without raising alarms. "What's the plan?" Miles asked quietly. Isaiah turned to Sergeant Torrance. "Medical emergency. You're bringing in civilian casualties discovered during your authorized excursion." Torrance nodded. "That might work for getting past the checkpoint, but these women will need housing, food, proper care. The officers will ask questions." "One step at a time," Isaiah replied. "First, we get them to safety. Then, we figure out the rest." They approached the checkpoint slowly, Torrance in the lead. Isaiah and Miles carried Yuki's stretcher, while Carter supported May, who had weakened considerably during their journey. Hana and the other women followed, heads bowed against the light rain. The sentry at the checkpoint straightened as they approached, his rifle shifting to a ready position. "Halt! Identify yourselves." "Sergeant Torrance, Medical Corps," Torrance called, returning from field assessment with wounded civilians. The sentry peered at them suspiciously. "I don't recall any authorized civilian evacuation tonight." "Medical emergency," Torrance replied crisply. "Found them during routine disease prevention patrol. One critical, needs immediate attention." The sentry stepped closer, his flashlight playing over the bedraggled group. His expression hardened when he saw the Asian women. "These are Japanese," he said flatly. "Civilians," Torrance corrected. "Victims. The critical case is a 16-year-old girl with pneumonia." The sentry shook his head. "I have orders. No unauthorized personnel, especially enemy nationals." "They're not enemy combatants," Isaiah interjected. "They're survivors of a comfort station, prisoners of the Japanese." The sentry's face showed a flicker of understanding, then hardened again. "Doesn't matter. Orders are orders. You'll have to take them to the civilian collection point in Naha." "That's 10 miles away," Miles protested. "The girl won't survive the trip." The sentry remained unmoved. "Not my problem." Torrance stepped forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "Private, I'm a medical officer, and I'm telling you, this girl is dying. If you deny her entry to this camp, you will be responsible for her death. Is that something you want on your conscience?" The sentry hesitated, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to disobey orders. "Get the duty officer," Isaiah suggested. "Let him make the call." After a moment's consideration, the sentry nodded and called into his radio. Within minutes, a lieutenant appeared. Young, tired-looking, but thankfully not Brennan. "What's the situation here?" he demanded. Torrance explained quickly, emphasizing the critical condition of Yuki and the status of the women as victims rather than enemies. The lieutenant listened, glancing occasionally at the shivering women. "Comfort station survivors?" he asked, his voice lowering. "Yes, sir," Isaiah confirmed. The lieutenant rubbed his face wearily. "This is irregular, very irregular." "Sir," Torrance pressed, "this girl needs immediate medical attention. The others need food, clean clothes, basic human dignity." After a long moment, the lieutenant nodded. "All right, the medical case goes to the hospital. The others," he fought for a moment, "put them in the storage tent behind the mess. It's empty now, and at least it's dry." "Thank you, sir," Torrance said with evident relief. They had just started through the checkpoint when a sharp voice cut through the night. "Hold right there!" Lieutenant Brennan strode toward them, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Behind him came 2 military police officers. "I thought I might find you here, Ward," Brennan said coldly. "Directly disobeying orders." Isaiah stood his ground. "Medical emergency, sir. This girl is dying. And, conveniently, you happen to find her?" Brennan's gaze swept over the group, lingering on the women with undisguised suspicion. "These are the women from that comfort station, aren't they? The ones you've been sneaking off to visit." The accusation hung in the air, its implication clear and ugly. Isaiah felt a surge of anger, but kept his expression neutral. "They're civilian casualties, sir," he said evenly, "in need of medical attention." Brennan turned to the duty lieutenant. "Did you authorize this?" "I was just allowing the medical case through," the lieutenant replied, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Sergeant Torrance says—" "Sergeant Torrance exceeded her authority," Brennan interrupted. He pointed to the MPs. "Take the civilians to the holding area. We'll sort this out in the morning." "Sir," Torrance protested, "the girl needs immediate treatment." Brennan's jaw tightened. "Fine. The medical case goes to the hospital. The rest to holding." "And these men?" the MP asked, indicating Isaiah, Miles, and Carter. "Arrest them," Brennan ordered. "Charges of insubordination, unauthorized absence from camp, and fraternization with enemy nationals." The second MP moved forward with handcuffs. Isaiah didn't resist as his wrists were secured behind his back. Miles and Carter likewise submitted to arrest without struggle. Hannah watched with growing alarm, her eyes fixed on Isaiah. She stepped forward, speaking rapidly in a mixture of Korean and broken English. "No! He help us! Good man! No arrest!" Brennan ignored her, directing the MPs to take the soldiers away. As they were led off, Isaiah managed to catch Hannah's eye one last time. "It's okay," he called to her. "You're safe now. That's what matters." The last thing he saw before being marched away was Hannah's face, a mixture of gratitude, concern, and something deeper that he couldn't name. Then, darkness swallowed her as he was led toward the stockade. Behind him, he could hear Torrance arguing fiercely with Brennan, insisting that Yuki be taken immediately to the hospital. At least the girl would get help. At least that part of their mission had succeeded. As for Isaiah and his friends, their future looked considerably bleaker. But even facing court-martial, Isaiah felt a sense of peace. They had done the right thing. No matter what happened next, no one could take that away. The holding tent was little more than canvas walls and a dirt floor, but it offered shelter from the rain. 2 MPs stood guard outside, one white, one black. The latter had given Isaiah a look of quiet respect when locking him in, though he'd said nothing. Isaiah sat on a wooden crate, his hands now cuffed in front of him rather than behind. Miles and Carter occupied similar makeshift seats across the narrow space. None of them had spoken much since their arrest 2 hours ago. Outside, the camp was coming to life with pre-dawn activity. They could hear trucks moving, orders being shouted, the metallic sounds of a military base preparing for another day of war. Carter shifted, wincing as the movement jarred his wounded arm. "How's it feeling?" Isaiah asked. "I'll live," Carter replied with a grim smile. "Better than sitting at a desk pushing papers." Miles snorted. "You might get plenty of that if we end up in the brig." The tent flap opened, admitting Lieutenant Brennan and a clerk carrying a clipboard. The soldiers struggled to their feet and stood at attention, as best they could with their hands cuffed. "Sit," Brennan ordered. He took a folding chair the clerk provided and studied each of them in turn. "I'm preparing charges for your court-martial. I thought I'd give you the opportunity to explain yourselves first." None of the men spoke. "Nothing to say?" Brennan pressed. "Not even you, Ward? Usually so quick with explanations." Isaiah met his gaze steadily. "The situation speaks for itself, sir." "Does it?" Brennan leaned forward. "Let me tell you what I see. 3 colored soldiers repeatedly violating orders, sneaking off base to visit a Japanese comfort station. Not out of some noble rescue impulse, but for more personal gratification." Isaiah's jaw tightened. The implication was clear and revolting. "That's not what happened, sir," he said evenly. "No? Then explain why you made multiple unauthorized visits before this rescue. Explain why you involved a female officer in your scheme. Explain why you directly disobeyed my orders, restricting you to camp." When Isaiah didn't immediately answer, Brennan continued. "The charges will be serious: insubordination, dereliction of duty, fraternization with enemy nationals, possibly even desertion, since you left camp without authorization during wartime." He let the words sink in. "That last one can carry the death penalty." Miles flinched slightly, but Isaiah's expression remained impassive. "However," Brennan continued, "I'm prepared to recommend leniency if you admit the truth. Tell me what really happened with those women, and I'll reduce the charges to simple disobedience." "We saw women being abused," Isaiah said carefully. "We brought them medical help. When one became critically ill, we brought them to proper care. That's the truth, sir." Brennan's face hardened. "You expect me to believe this was all about humanitarian concern? That 3 colored privates risked their careers, their lives, for Japanese women they'd never met before?" "Korean," Isaiah corrected quietly. "Most of them are Korean, taken from their homes by Japanese forces. And yes, sir, that's exactly what happened." Brennan studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're making a mistake, Ward. This noble act isn't going to play well at a court-martial, not for men like you." The emphasis on "men like you" made the racial subtext unmistakable. Isaiah had heard it his entire life. The assumption that his motives must be base, suspect, less than honorable because of the color of his skin. "Is there anything else, sir?" he asked calmly. Brennan stood. "The charges will be filed today. The military police will transfer you to the division headquarters for court-martial proceedings tomorrow." After he left, The three men sat in silence for several minutes. "Death penalty," Miles finally said quietly. "He can't be serious." "He's not," Carter replied. "He's trying to scare us into confessing to something that didn't happen." Isaiah stared at the tent wall. "He wants to make an example of us. That's it." Colored soldiers stepping out of line. "But the women can testify," Miles pointed out. "They know the truth." Isaiah shook his head. "They barely speak English, and their word against the white officers in this man's army?" He didn't need to elaborate. They all understood the reality. Outside, they heard a commotion, voices raised, footsteps approaching. The tent flap opened again to admit Sergeant Torrance. She looked exhausted but determined. 2 minutes, the guard said, then stepped back outside. Torrance moved quickly to the center of the tent, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Listen carefully. The girl, Yuki, is stable but still critical. The others are being held in the storage tent as promised. I've arranged for food, clean clothes." "Thank you," Isaiah said. "How's Hana?" "Strong, worried about you." Torrance glanced toward the tent entrance. "There's something else. I overheard Brennan talking with the captain. They're planning to transfer the women to a civilian internment camp tomorrow, separating them from any witnesses who could contradict the official story." Isaiah's stomach tightened. Internment camps were ostensibly for Japanese civilians, but conditions were harsh. And for women like Hana and the others, already traumatized, already stripped of identity and dignity. "We can't let that happen," he said quietly. Torrance nodded. "I'm working on it. Johnson is trying to contact his cousin in the Red Cross. If we can get them designated as refugees rather than enemy nationals." The guard's voice interrupted. "Time's up, Sergeant." Torrance squeezed Isaiah's shoulder. "Stay strong. This isn't over." After she left, the three men exchanged glances. "What happens to the women now?" Miles asked. Isaiah had no answer. They had rescued Hana and the others from one prison, only to deliver them to another kind of confinement. The thought filled him with a heavy sense of failure. Carter shifted on his crate. "At least they're alive. At least they have a chance." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Yes, a chance." It wasn't much comfort as they settled in to wait for whatever came next. Outside, rain began to fall again, pattering against a canvas roof like distant fingers drumming a funeral march. The morning dragged into afternoon. Occasional meals were brought, field rations, cold coffee. The guards changed shifts. From snippets of conversation, Isaiah learned that fighting had intensified to the south. The Japanese were making a desperate stand near Naha, the island's main city. Sergeant Torrance visited once more, bringing clean bandages for Carter's arm and news that Yuki's condition had improved slightly. The other women remained in the steerage tent, confused and frightened, but physically safe. "Hana asked about you," Torrance said quietly to Isaiah. "Wanted to know if you were being punished for helping them." "What did you tell her?" Isaiah asked. "The truth, that the military doesn't always reward those who do the right thing." As afternoon faded into evening, the distant sound of artillery grew more pronounced. Japanese counterattacks often came at dusk, taking advantage of failing light. "Sounds like they're hitting the northern perimeter," Miles observed, listening to the pattern of explosions. Carter nodded. "Getting closer, too." Isaiah had just closed his eyes, trying to rest despite the noise, when a new sound cut through the bombardment, the high-pitched wail of air raid sirens. "That's not right," Miles said, sitting up straight. "Japanese don't have air support anymore." Before anyone could respond, the world exploded into chaos. The ground shook violently as bombs fell nearby. Not Japanese artillery, but something much heavier. The canvas tent rippled like water in a windstorm. American bombers, Carter realized. They've got the coordinates wrong. Another explosion, closer this time. Dirt sprayed through the tent entrance. Outside they could hear shouting, the sound of men running. "Hey!" Miles called to the guards. "Get us out of here!" No response came. The guards had abandoned their post in the confusion. Isaiah stood, moving to the tent entrance. Through the gap, he could see the camp in chaos. Soldiers running for cover, tents burning, a supply truck overturned and smoking. In the distance, the distinctive silhouettes of American B-29 bombers passed overhead, their payloads falling on what they must have believed was a Japanese position. "We need to get out," Isaiah said urgently. "Find shelter." "In case you forgot, we're handcuffed," Carter replied, raising his bound wrists. Isaiah scanned the tent interior. There, a tent peg had worked loose in the bombing. He knelt and worked it free, then used its sharp point to attack the lock on his handcuffs. It was crude, desperate work, but after several tense minutes, the lock gave way with a click. "Hold still," he told Miles, moving to free his cuffs next. Another explosion rocked the ground, closer than before. The tent pole nearest the entrance cracked, sending canvas billowing downward. Once all three were free, they pushed out of the collapsing tent into the chaos beyond. The air was thick with dust and smoke. Through the haze, Isaiah tried to orient himself. "Medical tent should be that way," he shouted over the noise, pointing east. "Storage tents to the north." "We should report to the command post," Miles argued. "This is a mistake. Friendly fire. They need to radio the bombers." "You two go," Isaiah decided. "I'll check on the women." Carter gripped his shoulder. "They'll still court-martial us when this is over." "I know," Isaiah replied, "but right now, they need every soldier, and those women need someone they trust." Another explosion cut off further discussion. They separated, Miles and Carter heading for the command area, Isaiah moving north toward the storage tents. He had gone perhaps 50 yards when a figure materialized from the smoke. Sergeant Torrance, her white nurse's cape gray with dust. "Ward," she called. "The women, they're gone." Isaiah felt his blood run cold. "Gone? Where?" "Japanese patrol," Torrance explained breathlessly. "They used the bombing as cover, broke through the northern perimeter, took the women." "All of them?" "All except Yuki. She's still in the hospital." Torrance grabbed his arm. "They were heading east, toward the mountains, not more than 20 minutes ago." Isaiah's mind raced. East meant the Japanese were retreating, taking the women with them. And there was only one reason to take comfort women during a retreat. "I need a weapon," he said. "Follow me." Torrance led him to a damaged supply tent. Inside, among scattered equipment, they found an M1 carbine and ammunition. Isaiah checked the weapon quickly, loading a magazine. "You realize what this means?" Torrance said quietly. "You're going AWOL in a combat zone. If you're caught—" "I know," Isaiah interrupted. "But you heard what that Japanese soldier said. Special units coming to eliminate witnesses. If they've taken the women, it's to kill them." Torrance nodded grimly. "I'll cover for you as long as I can. Say you were helping with the wounded." "Thank you," Isaiah said, "for everything." He moved to leave, then paused. "If I don't make it back, tell my mother I did what was right. She'll understand." Torrance's eyes softened. "Go find them, Private. Bring them home." Isaiah slipped into the chaotic night, using the continuing bombardment as cover. The northern perimeter was barely guarded. Most soldiers had been pulled to fight fires or tend the wounded. He passed through easily, heading east into the forest beyond. The bombing had started fires in the dry underbrush. Smoke drifted between trees, limiting visibility. Isaiah moved quickly but cautiously, following what appeared to be a trail of footprints in the soft earth. As he went, he thought of Hana, her quiet strength, her scarred face, her hand clutching that faded red ribbon like it was her last connection to humanity. He had promised her safety. He had failed. Now he had one last chance to make it right. The trail led upward, into the rocky foothills. The bombing had stopped, but distant gunfire still echoed across the landscape. Isaiah paused occasionally, listening for voices or movement ahead. The Japanese patrol couldn't have more than an hour's head start. He found the first sign that he was on the right track near a small stream crossing. A scrap of cloth caught on a thorny bush. It was faded red silk, Hana's ribbon. Whether she had left it deliberately as a sign or it had torn free accidentally, Isaiah couldn't know. But it renewed his determination. He pressed on, moving faster now, despite the risk. The moon emerged from behind clouds, illuminating the path ahead. In its silver light, Isaiah could see clearer tracks, multiple people moving in single file up the hillside. At least some of the impressions were small, women's feet. He was close now, close enough that caution became paramount. Isaiah slowed, moving from tree to tree, scanning constantly for signs of the Japanese patrol. Then he heard it. Voices ahead. Male voices speaking Japanese. They came from beyond a rocky outcropping. Isaiah crept forward, staying low, until he could peer around the stones. What he saw made his blood freeze. A small cave entrance, illuminated by a single lantern. Outside stood 2 Japanese soldiers with rifles, and just visible inside the cave, huddled together, were the women, Hana, Mei, Ume, and Kimiko. A 3rd Japanese soldier emerged from the cave. An officer, judging by his uniform. He spoke sharply to the others, gesturing toward the cave entrance. His meaning was clear even without understanding the words. They were preparing to execute the women, and Isaiah was their only hope. Isaiah retreated a short distance to assess the situation. 3 Japanese soldiers that he could see, possibly more inside the cave, all armed, against his single carbine with 1 magazine of ammunition. The odds were poor, but there was no time to go for help, no time for careful planning. He had minutes, perhaps only seconds, before the execution began. He circled the outcropping, looking for a better angle. There, a cluster of boulders above and to the right of the cave entrance. If he could reach that position, he'd have the advantage of height and cover. Moving silently, Isaiah worked his way up the rocky slope. The footing was treacherous in the darkness, and once he dislodged a small stone that clattered downward. He froze, heart pounding, but the Japanese soldiers were too focused on their grim task to notice. When he reached the boulders, he settled into position, carbine ready. From here, he could see into the cave mouth. The women sat against the far wall, their faces pale ovals in the lantern light. Hana's expression was resigned but dignified, chin lifted slightly as if meeting death on her own terms. The Japanese officer had entered the cave again. He stood before the women, speaking in what Isaiah assumed was Korean or Japanese. Though Isaiah couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear, a final condemnation. One of the guards raised his rifle, aiming at Mei. Isaiah took a deep breath, steadied his aim, and fired. The guard crumpled, the rifle clattering to the stone floor. Before the others could react, Isaiah fired twice more in rapid succession. The second guard fell. The officer ducked behind a rock outcropping inside the cave, drawing his pistol. "Hana!" Isaiah shouted. "Run! This way!" The women scrambled to their feet, disoriented by the sudden gunfire. The officer fired his pistol toward the cave entrance, the bullets ricocheting off stone. Isaiah provided covering fire, forcing the officer to keep his head down. "Run!" he shouted again. "Up the hill!" Ume reached the entrance first, then Kimiko. Mei followed, helping Hana, who seemed to be limping. Isaiah continued firing, carefully spaced shots to conserve ammunition while keeping the officer pinned down. The women struggled up the slope toward his position. When they reached the boulders, Isaiah directed them to take cover. "Stay low," he instructed. "Don't move." The Japanese officer called out something from the cave. When no response came, he ventured a look around his cover. Isaiah fired, missing narrowly. The officer withdrew again. A standoff. Isaiah checked his ammunition. 6 rounds left. Not enough to hold the position indefinitely. They needed to move. "We go down the other side," he told the women, gesturing to indicate his meaning. Quietly. "Stay together." Hana nodded, translating for the others in whispers. Isaiah noticed blood on her leg. She had been injured somehow during the capture or escape. "You're hurt," he said, pointing to the wound. She shook her head dismissively. "Small. Can walk." From the cave, the officer called out again, this time in heavily accented English. "American soldier, you are surrounded. Surrender now, and the women will be spared." An obvious lie. Isaiah didn't bother responding. "May," he said quietly to the oldest woman, "take the others. Start down the hill, that way." He pointed to the western slope, which would eventually lead back toward the American camp. "I'll follow." May hesitated, looking to Hana. A quick exchange in Korean followed. Then May nodded. She led Ume and Kimiko away, staying low among the rocks and trees. Hana remained beside Isaiah. "I stay," she said firmly. "Help." "No," Isaiah replied. "Too dangerous. Go with them." Hana's expression hardened. Already dying once today. Not afraid. Before Isaiah could argue further, movement below caught his attention. The Japanese officer had emerged from the cave, pistol raised, scanning the hillside. If he spotted the retreating women. Isaiah aimed carefully and fired. The officer jerked but didn't fall, wounded rather than killed. He returned fire, the bullets pinging off the rocks uncomfortably close to Isaiah's position. "Go!" Isaiah urged Hana. "Now!" This time she obeyed, moving away in a crouched run after the others. Isaiah provided cover, firing his remaining rounds strategically to keep the wounded officer from pursuing. When his carbine clicked empty, Isaiah knew it was time to retreat. He scrambled backward from the boulders, staying low, then turned to run after the women. A shot rang out behind him. White-hot pain lanced through his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He fell, rolling several yards down the rocky slope before coming to rest against a tree trunk. The wounded Japanese officer had pursued, firing uphill. Now he approached cautiously, pistol aimed at Isaiah's prone form. Isaiah tried to rise, but his left arm wouldn't respond properly. Blood soaked through his uniform jacket. The bullet had struck his shoulder from behind, a through-and-through wound that burned like fire. The officer stood over him, pistol pointed at his head. He spoke in broken English. "Die for Japanese women, foolish American." Isaiah looked up at him, vision blurring from pain and blood loss. So this was how it ended. Miles from home, on a rocky hillside, on an island he'd never heard of before the war. The officer's finger tightened on the trigger. A rock struck the officer's head from behind, startling him. He turned, firing reflexively at the new threat. Hana stood 20 feet away, another rock already in hand. She had doubled back, risking her life to help Isaiah. The officer's shot missed, the bullet striking a tree beside her. That momentary distraction was all Isaiah needed. With his good arm, he lunged upward, tackling the officer around the knees. They fell together, struggling for control of the pistol. Despite his wounded shoulder, Isaiah fought with desperate strength. The pistol discharged once, twice, the bullets going wild. Then Isaiah managed to slam the officer's hand against a rock. The pistol fell, skittering away down the slope. The Japanese officer reached for his belt knife, but Isaiah was faster. He delivered a sharp blow to the man's temple, stunning him, then followed with a knockout punch. The officer went limp. Isaiah collapsed beside him, breathing heavily, his shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat. Hana appeared at his side, her face tight with concern. "Bad?" she asked, pointing to his wound. "Not good," Isaiah admitted, "but I can walk." She helped him to his feet, supporting him with surprising strength for her small frame. Together they stumbled down the hillside after the others, leaving the unconscious officer behind. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when they heard voices ahead. American voices. A patrol, scanning the area with flashlights. "Here!" Isaiah called weakly. "Americans here!" The flashlights swung in their direction. Figures approached cautiously, rifles ready. "Identify yourself!" a voice ordered. "Private First Class Isaiah Ward, 93rd Infantry," Isaiah replied, "with civilian refugees." The patrol surrounded them, a mixed group of white and black soldiers. Their sergeant, a grizzled veteran with a New York accent, took in the situation quickly. "You look like hell, Private," he observed. "And these would be the missing comfort women, I'm guessing?" "Yes, Sergeant," Isaiah replied, surprised. "How did you know?" "Word travels. We've been looking for you." The sergeant turned to his men. Jensen, Taylor, help the private. Carson, radio base, tell them we found the missing civilians and one wounded soldier. As the patrol organized a stretcher for Isaiah and support for Hannah, the sergeant leaned closer. Sergeant Torrance sent us. Said you might need backup. He glanced at the women. Looks like you handled it, though. Isaiah felt a wave of gratitude for Torrance's foresight. The others? There were 2 more women. Already found, the sergeant assured him. Pick them up half a mile back. They're safe. As they began the journey back to camp, Isaiah felt Hannah's hand slip into his. Despite the pain in his shoulder, despite the uncertainty still ahead, a sense of profound relief washed over him. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. The field hospital hummed with activity. Casualties from the bombing and subsequent Japanese counterattack filled every available bed. Doctors and nurses moved between patients, their faces showing the strain of too many hours without rest. Isaiah lay on a cot in a corner, his shoulder freshly bandaged. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. A lucky break, the doctor had called it. With proper care and a few weeks' recovery, he would regain full use of his arm. Not that he expected to get those weeks. As soon as he was stable, the military police would likely transfer him to the stockade to await court-martial. Lieutenant Brennan would see to that. The patrol sergeant had left hours ago, after delivering Isaiah and the women safely to camp. His parting words had been encouraging. I'll put in a good word, Private. What you did took guts. But Isaiah knew that one sergeant's good opinion wouldn't outweigh a lieutenant's determination to make an example of him. A nurse approached his cot, not Torrance, but a young white woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. How's the pain? She asked, checking his bandage. Manageable, Isaiah replied. The women who came in with me, do you know where they are? The Asian civilians? They're in the recovery tent, being checked for injuries, given food and clean clothes. She adjusted his IV drip. One of them keeps asking about you. Small woman with a scar on her face. Hannah, Isaiah said. Is she all right? Minor injuries only. She seems more concerned about you. The nurse glanced around, then lowered her voice. There's quite a story going around about how you rescued them. Twice. Isaiah said nothing. Stories wouldn't help him at his court-martial. Get some rest, the nurse advised. Doctor's orders. After she left, Isaiah closed his eyes, yielding to the exhaustion that had been building for days. Despite the pain and uncertainty, sleep came quickly. He woke to the sound of hushed voices. Opening his eyes, he saw Miles and Carter standing beside his cot. Both looked tired but uninjured. Welcome back to the land of the living, Miles said with a grin. Had us worried for a while there. Isaiah struggled to sit up. How long was I out? About 12 hours, Carter replied. It's morning now. Isaiah processed this information. And you're not in the stockade? That's the thing, Miles said, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. A lot happened while you were playing hero in the hills. He explained that during the bombing confusion, they had made their way to the command center. There, they found chaos. Communications disrupted, officers struggling to coordinate a response. Miles, with his background in radio operations, had stepped in to help restore contact with other units and with the bombers overhead. Turns out those B-29s had been given the wrong coordinates, Miles continued. They thought they were hitting a Japanese stronghold. I helped get through to their squadron leader, got them to redirect before they flattened the whole camp. And in the process, Carter added, saved the captain's precious map collection and about 200 lives. Isaiah blinked, absorbing this. So suddenly we went from troublemakers to heroes, Miles finished. The captain himself tore up Brennan's court-martial request, said any men who could keep their heads in that kind of chaos were the kind he wanted in his command. Isaiah felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by suspicion. What about Brennan? Carter's expression darkened. That's where it gets interesting. While everyone was focused on the bombing, he tried to arrange the women's transfer, forge orders to send them to an internment camp where they'd be treated as enemy nationals. Sergeant Torrance caught him, Miles added, reported him directly to the captain. Between that and your heroics bringing them back from the Japanese patrol, well, what? Brennan's been relieved of duty, Carter said with evident satisfaction, pending investigation into abuse of authority and falsification of documents. Isaiah let this sink in. It seemed too good to be true. Their names cleared, Brennan facing his own investigation. What about the women? He asked. What happens to them now? That's still being decided, Miles replied, but Sergeant Torrance has been advocating for them. Got the Red Cross involved, had them classified as rescued Allied civilians instead of enemy nationals. Makes a big difference in how they're treated. Isaiah nodded slowly. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The women's futures remained uncertain, but it was better than he had dared hope. There's one more thing, Carter said, his tone growing serious. The sick girl, Yuki. Isaiah tensed, preparing for bad news. She's improving, Carter continued. Doc says she'll make it. The antibiotics finally kicked in. The relief Isaiah felt at this news was profound. After everything they had risked, everything they had endured, at least they had saved one young life from being extinguished too soon. When can I see them? He asked. Probably tomorrow, Miles answered. Doctor's orders are for you to rest today. Bullet wounds are no joke, even the lucky ones. They talked a while longer, filling in details about the chaotic night, the damage to the camp, the casualties, mercifully few given the scale of the bombing, the renewed push against Japanese forces further south. After Miles and Carter left, promising to return later, Isaiah found himself alone with his thoughts. The pain in his shoulder had dulled to a persistent throb, manageable with the medication the nurses provided. But his mind remained active. Turning over the events of the past days, the choices he had made, the consequences still unfolding. He thought of Hana and the others. What would become of them now? The war was far from over, though Japanese forces were clearly in retreat. Even when peace finally came, what place would there be for women who had suffered as they had? These questions had no easy answers, but Isaiah found himself invested in them nonetheless. The fate of 5 Korean women had somehow become entwined with his own, creating connections that transcended language, culture, and the arbitrary divisions of war. As he drifted back to sleep, Isaiah's last conscious thought was of Hana's face, not as he had first seen it, marked by fear and resignation, but as it had looked when she returned to save him on the hillside. Determined, fierce, fully alive. Whatever happened next, he knew he would never forget that image as long as he lived. The field hospital hummed with activity. Casualties from the bombing and subsequent Japanese counterattack filled every available bed. Doctors and nurses moved between patients, their faces showing the strain of too many hours without rest. Isaiah lay on a cot in a corner, his shoulder freshly bandaged. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. A lucky break, the doctor had called it. With proper care and a few weeks' recovery, he would regain full use of his arm. Not that he expected to get those weeks. As soon as he was stable, the military police would likely transfer him to the stockade to await court-martial. Lieutenant Brennan would see to that. The patrol sergeant had left hours ago, after delivering Isaiah and the women safely to camp. His parting words had been encouraging. I'll put in a good word, Private. What you did took guts. But Isaiah knew that one sergeant's good opinion wouldn't outweigh a lieutenant's determination to make an example of him. A nurse approached his cot, not Torrance, but a young white woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. How's the pain? She asked, checking his bandage. Manageable, Isaiah replied. The women who came in with me, do you know where they are? The Asian civilians? They're in the recovery tent, being checked for injuries, given food and clean clothes. She adjusted his IV drip. One of them keeps asking about you. Small woman with a scar on her face. Hana, Isaiah said. Is she all right? Minor injuries only. She seems more concerned about you. The nurse glanced around, then lowered her voice. There's quite a story going around about how you rescued them. Twice. Isaiah said nothing. Stories wouldn't help him at his court-martial. Get some rest, the the nurse advised. Doctor's orders. After she left, Isaiah closed his eyes, yielding to the exhaustion that had been building for days. Despite the pain and uncertainty, sleep came quickly. He woke to the sound of hushed voices. Opening his eyes, he saw Miles and Carter standing beside his cot. Both looked tired, but uninjured. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Miles said with a grin. "Had us worried for a while there." Isaiah struggled to sit up. "How long was I out?" "About 12 hours, Carter replied. "It's morning now." Isaiah processed this information. "And you're not in the stockade?" "That's the thing," Miles said, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "A lot happened while you were playing hero in the hills." Miles explained that during a bombing confusion, they had made their way to the command center. There they found chaos, communications disrupted, officers struggling to coordinate a response. Miles, with his background in radio operations, had stepped in to help restore contact with other units and with the bombers overhead. "Turns out those B-29s had been given the wrong coordinates," Miles continued. "They thought they were hitting a Japanese stronghold. I helped get through to their squadron leader, got them to redirect before they flattened the whole camp. And in the process," Carter added, "saved the captain's precious map collection and about 200 lives." Isaiah blinked, absorbing this. "So, suddenly we went from troublemakers to heroes," Miles finished. "The captain himself tore up Brennan's court-martial request. Said any men who could keep their heads in that kind of chaos were the kind he wanted in his command." Isaiah felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by suspicion. "What about Brennan?" Carter's expression darkened. "That's where it gets interesting. While everyone was focused on the bombing, he tried to arrange the women's transfer, forge orders to send them to an internment camp where they'd be treated as enemy nationals. Sergeant Torrance caught him," Miles added, "reported him directly to the captain. Between that and your heroics bringing them back from the Japanese patrol, well, what? Brennan's been relieved of duty," Carter said with evident satisfaction, "pending investigation into abuse of authority and falsification of documents." Isaiah let this sink in. It seemed too good to be true. Their names cleared, Brennan facing his own investigation. "What about the women?" he asked. "What happens to them now?" "That's still being decided," Miles replied. "But Sergeant Torrance has been advocating for them. Got the Red Cross involved, had them classified as rescued Allied civilians instead of enemy nationals. Makes a big difference in how they're treated." Isaiah nodded slowly. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The women's futures remained uncertain, but it was better than he had dared hope. "There's one more thing," Carter said, his tone growing serious. "The sick girl, Yuki." Isaiah tensed, preparing for bad news. "She's improving," Carter continued. "Doc says she'll make it. The antibiotics finally kicked in." The relief Isaiah felt was profound. After everything they had risked, everything they had endured, at least they had saved one young life from being extinguished too soon. "When can I see them?" he asked. "Probably tomorrow," Miles answered. "Doctor's orders are for you to rest today. Bullet wounds are no joke, even the lucky ones." They talked a while longer, filling in details about the chaotic night, the damage to the camp, the casualties, mercifully few, given the scale of the bombing, the renewed push against Japanese forces further south. After Miles and Carter left, promising to return later, Isaiah found himself alone with his thoughts. The pain in his shoulder had dulled to a persistent throb, manageable with the medication the nurses provided. But his mind remained active, turning over the events of the past days, the choices he had made, the consequences still unfolding. He thought of Hana and the others. What would become of them now? The war was far from over, though Japanese forces were clearly in retreat. Even when peace finally came, what place would there be for women who had suffered as they had? These questions had no easy answers, but Isaiah found himself invested in them nonetheless. The fate of 5 Korean women had somehow become entwined with his own, creating connections that transcended language, culture, and the arbitrary divisions of war. The next day, his shoulder bandaged but mobile, Isaiah was cleared to leave the medical tent. He walked slowly through the camp, noting the repairs already underway after the bombing. American efficiency at work. Clear the debris, patch the holes, move forward. If only human damage could be repaired as readily. He found the women's quarters, a small tent near the field hospital, guarded but not prison-like. Sergeant Torrance stood outside, clipboard in hand, speaking with a Red Cross worker. She smiled when she saw him. "Private Ward, good to see you vertical. Thank you, Sergeant, for everything." She nodded, understanding all he meant to convey. "They're inside. Been asking about you." Isaiah hesitated. "All of them?" "Especially Hannah," Torrance replied with a knowing look. "Go on. 10 minutes, then they need rest." Inside the tent, the transformation was remarkable. The women sat on proper cots, dressed in clean clothes, civilian dresses provided by aid workers. Their faces were washed, hair combed. They looked different, almost peaceful. Yuki lay on a cot by the window. Her color improved, though still weak. May and the others nodded to Isaiah with shy smiles. Hannah sat alone at the far end. When she saw him, she stood quickly, then seemed unsure what to do next. The cultural gap yawned between them. What was the proper greeting between a Korean former prisoner and her American rescuer? Isaiah solved the problem by offering a simple bow, the respectful gesture he'd seen Okinawan civilians use. Hannah's eyes widened. Then she returned the bow, deeper. They sat together on a bench near the tent entrance, close enough for quiet conversation, but still within sight of the others. A female interpreter, a Japanese-American WAC, sat nearby, but gave them space. "How is your arm?" Hannah asked in careful English. "Better," Isaiah replied. "And you, your leg?" "Small hurt only," she said, touching her bandaged calf. "Doctors say heal good." They fell silent, the weight of shared experience hanging between them. What words could possibly bridge the gulf of their different worlds? Finally, Hannah spoke again, this time in Korean. The interpreter translated. "She says she never thought she would be treated as a human being again. That what you did, not just the rescue, but the way you looked at her, spoke to her, gave her back something she thought was gone forever." Isaiah felt his throat tighten. Tell her that's how everyone deserves to be treated, always." When the interpreter conveyed his words, Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, unwilling to show weakness even now. Through the interpreter, they spoke of practical matters, where the women might go after the war, how they might find their families if any survived, what resources might help them rebuild their lives. Sergeant Torrance entered with a paper in hand. Her expression was mixed, both good and difficult news. "Orders just came through," she said to Isaiah. "Your unit ships out tomorrow morning. The 93rd is being deployed to support operations on Luzon." The morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect day that seemed to mock the violence still scarring the island. Isaiah stood with his unit at the embarkation point, duffel bag at his feet, rifle slung over his good shoulder. Miles and Carter waited nearby, unusually quiet. None of them had slept much. War offered little time for proper goodbyes or reflection. The landing craft bobbed in the gentle surf, ready to ferry them to the troop transport anchored offshore. Officers moved among the men, checking equipment, confirming counts. 10 minutes, called the sergeant. Isaiah scanned the beach one last time, not really expecting to see her, but hoping nonetheless. The women would be transferred to a refugee center later that week, beginning their long journey toward whatever future awaited them. Then he saw them, a small group walking along the shoreline. Sergeant Torrance led the way, with Hannah, May, and the others following. Even Yuki, supported by nurses, had come. Isaiah stepped away from the formation, ignoring the sergeant's questioning look. He walked across the sand to meet them. No interpreter today. They would make do with gestures, simple words, and the understanding that had grown between them, despite everything. Hannah stepped forward from the group. She looked different in the Red Cross dress, her hair pulled back with a simple band. The scar on her cheek caught the morning light. a mark of survival, not disfigurement. "You go," she said simply. Isaiah nodded. "New orders." "Good soldier," she added, with the ghost of a smile. From her pocket, Hannah withdrew something small, the faded silk ribbon he had seen her clutching that first day in the comfort station. Her last possession from home. From before her world shattered, she held it out to him. "Remember," she said. Isaiah hesitated, understanding the significance of the gift. "You keep," he suggested, "for home." Hannah shook her head firmly. No home there now. She pressed the ribbon into his palm and closed his fingers around it. New memory. The ribbon was soft, worn with age and handling. It had witnessed her suffering, her endurance, her survival. Now she entrusted it to him, a bond between two people who had no reason to trust each other but did anyway. "Thank you," Isaiah said, tucking the ribbon carefully into his breast pocket. The boat horn sounded, a 2-minute warning. Isaiah glanced back at his unit, already boarding the landing craft. "Must go," he said. Hannah nodded, understanding. Good life, she wished him. Safe. No elaborate farewells, no dramatic promises, just simple human connection in a world that had done everything to deny it to them both. Isaiah rejoined his unit, climbing aboard the rocking landing craft. As it pulled away from shore, he watched the small group of women growing smaller on the beach. Hannah raised her hand once in a final gesture. Out on the troop transport, as Okinawa receded into the distance, Isaiah found a quiet spot on deck. He took out the ribbon, studying its faded color, once vibrant red, now the shade of dried roses. From his pocket, he retrieved a pencil and paper. His letter home would be censored, of course. No details of operations, locations, or movements. But perhaps he could convey something of what he had learned on this island. Dear Mother and Father, I am well, though I've seen much hardship here. I've learned that dignity can survive in the darkest places. I've met people who endured things no person should suffer, yet kept their humanity. It gives me hope that when this war ends, something better might be possible for all of us. When he finished writing, Isaiah folded the letter carefully. He would mail it tomorrow. Then he took Hannah's ribbon and tucked it into his breast pocket, close to his heart. The ship sailed onward, carrying him toward another battlefield, another chapter. But something had changed. In saving Hannah and the others, Isaiah had reaffirmed his own belief in what was worth fighting for. Not abstract principles, but the simple dignity of every human life. The war would end someday. The world would rebuild. And perhaps, in that new world, the barriers that had separated him from Hannah, race, nationality, language, would matter less than the humanity that united them. Isaiah watched the horizon, the ribbon a small warmth against his chest, as the ship sailed toward whatever came next.